Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me once again on GBNews Originals. My guest right now is Tom Luongo, who's a geopolitical commentator, market analyst. I've been listening to Tom for a long time now and finding his assessment of the big picture incredibly helpful. So thank you for making time, Tom.
Oh, thank you, Neil, for the invite. I really do appreciate it. I've been listening to you for a long time as well, so this is a kind of mutual appreciation society thing. So
I'm delighted to hear it. I want to make the most of my time, so right away I'll say I I live the vast majority of my time. I'm a regular person. I'm surrounded by regular people that I meet in the street. People who, broadly speaking, live paycheck to paycheck. They've got no time really to stop and smell the roses. If they glimpse the mainstream media, then they're being lied to. If they have time to venture into the online alternative, then that offering is scary in a different way. So my kind of opening question to you is, what mindset should a regular person with all of those concerns adopt right now?
yeah, no, that's a really good question. What I would say, Neil, is that I'm a middle class kid from upstate New York. I'm nothing special either. And the end of the day, all of my friends and my family and everybody else, and most of my patrons are just normal people, right? And so they're all trying to make sense of what looks like a senseless world. And so what I would say to them is that you need to, in effect, this is what my wife and I do all the time. We prepare for the worst, right, and hope for the best. And there's a what I've been trying to figure out, in all of my commentary and all of my analysis of the world is to see, like, up until a few years ago, it was all, well, it's all the globalists are in charge. They're going to run the table on us. They're going to, they're going to implement their techno feudalism or whatever their plan is. And I'm like, I'm just along for the ride. And, like a lot of people, I was a, kind of black pilled, chuckling, collapsitarian, person. And then after a while, I started to watch countervailing things occur. And I think the first thing for me to happen was Brexit. I don't think anybody expected the Brexit vote to go the way it did. And then it was clearly going to be used for other nefarious purposes. But then when Donald Trump got elected in 2016, the game board changed completely, right? And I've had to go back over and think that through, right, over time. It wasn't my perspective back in 2016, but as I've watched things play out over the last 9 years, it's pretty obvious that there's a very strong countervailing, effectively populist or I hate to even use populism versus authoritarianism anymore. I think that all of these isms are kind of, other than communism, I think all of them are invalid in a certain level, right? If you really dig into it. Meaning that I think communism is the thing we have to fight, not the thing that we should be embracing. Sorry, let me just make that abundantly clear. Like, I don't believe capitalism versus communism is the thing. I don't believe any of that stuff. So what I'm saying to the average person is, on your at the end of the day, what you really need to do is start thinking about how you can remove your risk to their systems, their fight that's happening at this like 10,000 or 20,000 foot level that you can't see. And I can, and even the best of us who spend 60, 70 hours a week trying to understand this can barely understand, right? So how is the average person going to even begin to appreciate this? And, listening to a commentator like myself, I know I get this feedback all the time from people like, dude, you're great, but I don't understand 90% of the words that come out of your mouth. I believe you believe them and I believe you've got it, but I don't get it yet. And so with only through repetition and time do people really begin to understand it. And they have to take that time, which they don't have. So what I can tell people is the following. For all of his faults, Donald Trump understands what the problem is. And he is attempting to forge a true, honest to God, independent United States for the first time since, honestly, the end of the Revolutionary War. That means political independence, financial independence, legal independence from the mothership, the um, the Crown of England, along with continental Europe, which I like to kind of call Davos. There's this globalist impulse towards that, and they're kind of aligned in that respect. And understand that Donald Trump is trying to do this. So do what you can do to shore up your local community and your local family. That means get rid of all the potential risks of them trying to implement digital IDs and central bank digital currencies. Get your balance sheet in order as best you can. I recommend to people all the time, like, look to your local community and ask yourself, what can I do to improve the lives of the people on the street that I pass every day? how can I give them back 30 seconds of their day or a minute of their day, right? Meaning that if you see a little thing that can be fixed in your particular area of expertise, I don't care what it is. It could be building code, it could be, whatever it is that you do for a living, or, what communities you're part of, make somebody else's day better, fix a pothole on your private road, do something that will get somebody else's life a little bit of time back. And then when you realize that once you've done that and you pay that forward, everybody else then gets a minute back, and then a minute back, and a minute back. And before you know it, everybody's a little bit more, has got an hour back of their day. Now, guess what's going to happen? Of course, these people are then going to try and figure out how they can steal that hour back from you by raising your taxes or putting in some dumb regulation or whatever. Understand they're going to do that, and that the fight is eternal, right? Against this kind of impulse. And understand that that's why we get up every morning and we do our thing. Like, I'm in the third stage of my life, right? My daughter's grown. I'm, now, moving into that third stage of my life, which is not done being a dad, but I'm mostly done being a dad. Now it's time to be, okay, so what's my legacy going to be? What am I going to leave behind? Right? That's that classic Gary North style 3-layer cake of a person's life. And for a man, it's what legacy do you leave behind? What are you going to do, and what impact are you going to make? Now, we all have our different skills. And so my skills happen to be trying to figure out how these people operate. So that's what I do, right? And
I find it
your job is to
profound.
communicate with people and to be a bridge for that, right? So
I find it profound, Tom, that you're saying that, and I listen. I'm speaking to different people all the time. Glenn Greenwald, I just Alex Craner, I spoke to, and like you say, people with real intense forensic understanding of finance, geopolitics, born of years of experience, and yet every one of them, and more besides, are stripping away the veneer and saying it's what I'm hearing over and over again. It's all coming down to fundamentals. That the most important investment you can make is in your fellow human being,
yes.
and that the transactional currency that's going to make the difference in the short to medium, even to the long term, is your fellow human being. And I find that informative, but at a more elemental level, profoundly moving.
Yeah, no, I agree. Neil, and Alex is a good friend of mine. I've never had the pleasure of meeting Glenn. Alex and we've done one podcast together. We've done 100, right? And I've met Mr. Craner in real life, and I can tell you that in real life, he's exactly the same person that you see when you see him, as a talking head on a camera. He's one of the finest human beings I've ever met. And, we agree on a great number of these basic frameworks, like what do we do to improve the lives of the people around us, and how do we, our job, the way I see it. And my wife told me this ages ago. I said, why do people even listen to me ranting? She said, because you make sense of the senseless, and you give people back their time by giving them a framework that they can look at, and they go, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Now I can go to work and not be so angry. Now I can go back. Now I can go to work and do better work. Now I can, I can do an extra break job a day or whatever, because I'm not spending half of my day. I'm not spending that time between jobs, if you're a mechanic, like screaming about and worrying about the way the government is screwing you, right? So they go, oh, it's just that thing again. Tom was right about that again. Like, that kind of thing, or Neil was right about it, or Alex was right about it. And we help make sense for people. And that's what I'm talking about. We get back their time. And I think it's a very powerful thing, because yes, it is profound that the goal ultimately is to, what is money? Money is just a means to an end. It's just a means to accumulate the things that matter to you, and the things that are going to turn your needs and wants into reality, and whatever those needs and wants are. And what we have to do as commentators, and then, in order to advise policymakers, is to say, look, you put policies in place that allow people to make to make good choices about how to build civilization as opposed to tear it down. And what we've had, and what we've all lived through, I'm 57 years old. I don't know how old you are, but I know Alex has, how old? I'm sorry.
58.
Okay. So we're of an age, right? And like we've lived this entire life with policymakers that have been trying to do everything that will destroy our lives and destroy civilization, as opposed to reinforce it and make it better. And that's, I think, if there's one takeaway from all of this commentary, is for me, is I think we're at an inflection point between that system and the new system that's going to come about. I look at the younger generation. I talk to my daughter about this stuff all the time, and she and I don't agree about, in many ways, about hardly anything except this point. The system is designed against them, and they're not going to participate. And because they're not going to participate, which is very similar to the attitude I had when I was a kid. So Gen X kid, creating an effect, a kind of Gen X, in a Zoomer persona. She gets it. She's like, the system doesn't work for me, and I'm not going to spend a minute trying to interface with it as best as possible. And that impulse is what's going to drive them out of power, I think, in the long run.
Your personal data could be exposed right now without you even knowing it. And if you want it removed, use incogni.com/GBNews in the description now and get 60% off an annual plan on us. Incogni reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information be deleted from their databases. And they'll keep sending removal requests to make sure your data stays gone. Sometimes your information ends up on strange, obscure websites that automated tools just can't reach. And that's why Incogni just launched their unlimited plan with a feature called custom removals. With this, you can submit any link where your personal information appears, literally paste in the URL, and their privacy team will investigate and work to get it removed. And getting started is super easy. Hit the link in the description, create an Incogni account, and tell them whose data you want removed. Grant them permission to work on your behalf, and then all you've got to do is sit back and relax. They'll keep you updated along the way. Incogni is totally risk-free for 30 days. If you try it, it's not for you, you'll get a full refund. So take back control of your personal data today with Incogni. Use our code GBNews at checkout via the link in the description, and you'll get 60% off an annual plan.
I'm often thrown back on movie analogies, and I think often about Cool Hand Luke, and I think about when the George Kennedy dragline character, there's a card game, and the Paul Newman character wins. Dragline says he beat you mullet heads with a hand and nothing. Paul Newman says sometimes nothing can be a real cool hand. And the lesson from that is, if you have nothing, it's how you play with nothing, it's how you present with nothing. And I think when you get away from the fact that there's so many people, they don't have enough slack in the system to buy gold, they can't buy Bitcoin, they just don't have it, and so what they have is nothing. And yet there has to be a transactional possibility in people realizing that the nothing that they don't have is something that they don't want at a certain level.
Yeah, I wrote in a poem a long time ago when I was in college. I was a poet when I was in college. And I said, nothing is worth the nothing you can't have. And at some point you have to let it all go, right? You have to let go of all the worries and all the complaints. This is what the poem was about. You have to let go of all those things. You have to let go of even the persona you have of yourself, and go and realize that you're out of phase with the world. You don't have anything wanting or striving about all these things. If you're going to make anything of yourself, you just have to let all that go. And so at the end, nothing is worth the nothing you can't have. And then, figure out who it is that you're going to be ultimately. Now, the poem was written by an angry 21-year-old who left it there. That was the final line of a pretty vulgar piece of work. But the 57-year-old says, looks back. I've been doing this a lot recently. I'm going back and reading my old work from my old writing from that time to see who I was. And all those pieces now hit so much differently than they did then. All that writing, all those observations that I made when I was in my early 20s as a cynical, in my early 20s, cynical, apolitical man. And now I look at it today and I'm like, well, you were on to something, but you weren't on the right path either. And so you were onto something, but you weren't even listening to yourself. You were writing something that you thought said X, when in reality it was saying not X at all. It was saying, get to work, dude. You've got find your way through this as much as possible. And it's interesting to see how you grow over time, see how you review your own work and all of that. And we all have that when we sit down and look back over the landscape of our lives, right? In that respect. So you're completely right, Neil, that we are in that this is a very profound moment that we're in, where we all can do the kind of self-reflection and ask ourselves, what world do you want to live in? Because we have the opportunity to build a new world because the old one's getting torn down. Like, that's clearly happening, both from its own inertia and from the oppositional force that are coming from people literally saying, I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And, so
I take an immeasurable amount of comfort from, and I hate that sort of patronizing term that you have to use when you're 57 and 50 about younger people, but I take an immeasurable amount of comfort from listening to people of the upcoming generation who just make it plain that they neither can nor want to have any part of what they look on at as being the system that excludes them. And so they've just taken the perfectly logical and rational decision. Well, if they don't want me, I don't want them. And I see that, and I take great comfort from it. When I've also been listening for a long time to people saying that financial collapse is coming, existential financial collapse is coming, and yet that financial system is essentially still there, the same way that it always has been. I wonder, do you finally think that existential moment for the existing financial system is upon us, or will the cabal or whoever just find another way to kick it down the road for another 10 years?
That's the interesting part about it. This is what gives me so much hope, is the fact that every other time that their system has reached an existential crisis, they had the majority of the capital, they had the majority of the industrial base, they had the majority of the trade routes and the political power and everything else. They don't have that today. When you look at an emergent America throwing off the vestiges of the shackles of continental Europe on our policy, which is exactly what Donald Trump is doing, restoring the original constitutional republic and the executive authority of the president in his full Article 2 glory, and with a Supreme Court that is, fully behind him. And now all he's got to deal with is a traitorous Congress, along with a monetary system in the United States that is clearly deprecating the Fed. When you have that, plus Russia, plus China opposing old continental Europe, that's an unbeatable combination. And so all we really have to do is navigate, at this point in time, the war between Russia and Ukraine and making some form of peace in the Middle East. Now, neither of the solutions that are going to come out of those situations are going to be acceptable morally, politically, economically, militarily to anybody. They're all going to be bad. They're all going to look bad from one perspective or another, because that's the definition of a good deal. Everybody walks away a little bit unhappy, right? But I think that the general thing that I think Trump is trying to accomplish is to finally put an end to all of the, as Alex Craner would put it, set the red ants and the black ants against each other in a jar, shake the jar, and watch them kill each other, which is what they normally do to us. We're seeing that everywhere right now. And Israel, Gaza, Israel, Iran, Israel in general, all of that is, part of that process and part of that strategy. And it's failing. And Trump is just not really going along with it. What he's doing is stepwise diffusing all of that, giving everybody their talking points, and then going, see, you got everything you wanted and you're still not very happy. I'm speaking about the neocons getting the United States to bomb Iran. Because what happened was as the outcome of that? Well, I bombed Iran's nuclear program back to the Stone Age. Israel can no longer complain that Iran is a month away from a nuclear weapon now for the first time in 30 years. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. All that matters is that Donald Trump is enforcing that as a talking point and making that popularized for the average person, as we started this podcast, to say, oh, that's it. And though now all of a sudden the domestic political power of that point of view has been neutered. And now we watch the neocons in Congress scramble to try and keep that impetus alive. And they can't. They're failing miserably. And that's a great sign. I mean, it's a process to deprogram the American people and really the Western world over this entire conflict. So, I'm not trying to absolve Israel of any of their perfidy. I hate what they've done in Gaza or anything along those lines. I'm just looking at it strategically and looking at it. I'm looking at the way you build and destroy political capital in the United States, and Trump is doing it masterfully, to be honest with you. It looks crazy, but he's actually pulling it off.
Okay. At the moment, unless it's just a psyop, it would appear that everyone's buying gold. Nation states are buying gold. Increasingly, private individuals are being encouraged to buy physical gold. I've always understood it that gold is a war currency. That people buy gold, nations buy gold because they're getting ready for being on a war footing. Is that the case? I mean, I listen to the saber rattling. I live in Europe, I live in Britain, I live in Scotland, and I listen to the saber rattling, and I think, are we actually, the EU and everything around it, are we moving towards war? And is the EU buying time because everybody knows that everybody has shot all their bullets and fired all their missiles, and it's going to take 2 years, 5 years, 10 years to tool up and rearm. So we're just buying time. But are we in a situation in which we are working towards a war footing? And in that scenario, what falls over first? Is it the EU? Is it NATO? Because
Both.
clearly
They're kind of synonymous
they
at this
can't
point,
cash the checks that the rhetoric is writing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Is it the EU? Is it NATO? It's probably NATO first, because Donald Trump has made it abundantly clear that he'll happily sell them weapons they can't afford, that we can't make, that they can't afford, and that, you know what I mean? So at the end of the day, it's all this like, hey, yeah, I'll give you all these weapons. We can't make them at the rate that the EU wants them, or the price that they can afford to pay. The EU is going to, continue to saber rattle against the Russians in order to try and get them on tilt to do something dumb, so that everybody can go, see, the Russians are evil, and it isn't working, because Trump and Putin are clearly working behind the scenes to de-escalate all of this stuff, sending counter signals in both directions. And so there's two things. One, gold, you are correct. Gold is, I wouldn't call it a war currency, but that's a way of putting it. I just like geopolitical crisis, right? It doesn't matter what the crisis is. It could be financial, right? It could be a bond market collapse. It could be a potential war scenario. It could be many things. What the central banks are doing at this point is getting ready to understand that the world is breaking up out of a globalist or globalized trade system, and we're moving to currency blocks, and we're moving towards national sovereignty, needing to have enough collateral, pristine collateral, not in the form of U.S. treasuries, not in the form of Chinese government bonds or anything else. Debt is no longer really conceived of or thought of as pristine collateral. Gold and Bitcoin are, and they're becoming the pristine collateral assets of the new monetary system that's coming. Will there be enough gold and or Bitcoin at whatever price? Yeah, I mean, there's always enough of everything depending on price. Will silver become part of that conversation? Probably not, because there's too many other industrial uses for it. What I would say is that's what really has been driving this, because central banks have been buying gold, honestly, for years. And I don't think it's been, for at least 5 years have they been 15% of the annual gold demand, right? So with that said, I would say that that's really what's driving a lot of this. There's not enough physical gold at current prices. So, yeah, like that's happening. The EU, of course, and the old British, aristocracy, and the European aristocracy, to be more fair, really does need to have a war to cover, one, their default of their sovereign bonds, which is coming, because they want to default on them all, move over to a central bank digital currency, and default on the existing debt. But they need to do that after the United States collapses, and they get the United States embroiled in a war they can't win. So, because you have to attack the United States credit rating first, or they have to foment the civil war within the United States, which is clearly what they're ginning up right now during the government shutdown and all the ICE protests from Antifa and all the rest of it. Clearly, they're trying to recast Donald Trump as Abraham Lincoln. So that's the big game. If the average person on the street, again, going back to the person that we're supposed to be, centering this talk around, that's the big game. And all the noise on a day-to-day basis reduces to that. So
If you were a betting man, and I'm guessing on some level you are, Davos, World Economic Forum, neocons, and which, looking at the runners and riders, who would you put your money on?
none of them. I put my money on Donald Trump, Xi, and Putin. I'm putting my money. I'm betting all of my money on not BRICS, but ARC, America, Russia, China. That we move the center of the world to the center of the Pacific Ocean, with all of the major powers that ring the Pacific Ocean, or we can flip the map up and look at the North Pole, and we can view the world from the perspective of the North Pole. I happen to believe in global cooling, so I'm going with the Ring of Fire. So I think that the Arctic thing is interesting, but in 10 years, I think it's going to be too cold to even care. Even Russia's nuclear powered icebreakers are not going to be enough. But that's my personal opinion on this. I may be wrong. My point being is that, as I said earlier, Russia, China, and the United States are all led by patriots who understand that they are all, in effect, implementing the same system. Donald Trump is not implementing a much different economic system as a transition than Vladimir Putin has. He's going to nationalize parts of the economy. He's going to do all sorts of things that he has to do in order to get control of things, get rid of the traders, and then allow, a free market to emerge. And I can tell you that right now what's happening is the opposition from Europe and City of London, whoever you want to call it, Davos, World Economic Forum, they're all part of the same group. They're trying to stop that integration desperately. And
you said the thing about people who don't have Wikipedia pages. I've always subscribed. Well, I haven't always, but in more recent times, I've subscribed to the idea that if I know their name and if I have seen their face, then they don't matter. When it comes to patriotism, isn't that trumped by that level above that knows no patriotism, that has no Wikipedia page, that is transnational at the fundamental level? I mean, what place patriots like Xi, if he is, whose name we know and face we know, and Putin and Trump, whose names and faces we know, if there's a high tail, to use this John Wick analogy, what does it matter?
It's a very fair point to steal effectively to basically call me on that. And that's fair. I agree with that, because I don't think Trump's in power if there wasn't a larger group of patriots behind him that put him back in power. Like for example, and I think that this is the banking class of the United States having now declaring independence from the old system. Like, I think at some point somebody went for it all, like during COVID, or even before that, they went for it all to destroy the US. And I think that Wall Street said, you know what? No. And then during that time that was being rolled out and laying out the foundational base layer of a new monetarily independent United States, then we can have Donald Trump come back to power if he can survive the lawfare, the assassination attempts, and everything else. And if so, then we're going to put him in power. If it doesn't work, then we just go to the fallback plan of going along to getting along, and we took our shot and we lost, right? Which was clearly the plan, which was clearly the situation, say in June or July of 2024, before Butler, Pennsylvania. After Trump won, no. At that point, they're like, where the old faction, say the Continental faction, is saying that's enough. Now, on the Russian-Chinese side, Xi was placed in power by the powers that be within China, to be the guy to do what needed to be done, which is to strip out all the globalists, the Hu Jintao part of this Chinese CCP, and his job is just about done. And that's why we keep hearing all of these arguments, or these things about Xi's going to be removed from power, blah blah blah. And I think it's true. It may be to the point where he is just about done. And the same thing with Putin. Putin, I think, was brought into power. Russia's probably a little different. I think Putin is what you get. I don't think there's another layer above Putin. I think Putin is in charge in Russia. And his
I think Russia's a real country.
Yeah. What's that?
I think Russia's a real country.
Yeah.
In the way that we all understand what a country's supposed to be. I think Russia is one.
Right.
Maybe the
And I
last
think the
one.
United States is trying to get to that point where they can become a real country. And then we can turn around and make Canada into a real country. And we can save the UK, Ireland, Scotland, the Midlands, England, not necessarily Britain, but England. Those all, the whole Commonwealth needs to be saved. I think Donald Trump is coming for y'all.
My wife said to me, back in the day, she said that the 2016 phenomenon, which saw Brexit and Trump 1.0, she said everything that's happened since has been a punishment beating meted out to the general population because, that wasn't supposed. Neither of those things was supposed to happen.
No.
And then I look on, moving on from that, I look on at everything that happened with from 2019 onwards into the COVID debacle, and I look at it now, and it looks to me like powerful people, that had opened the second bottle of red wine late at night with their credit cards and started to go shopping online. I will buy that, and then woke up in the morning and thought, what I bought what?
Right.
I bought world domination now. That's what it feels to me. They went early because they were drunk on something, because they had got excited about the punishment beating that they had been meting out since 2016, and things got beyond them. And it seems to me, quite frankly, that in a kind of inadvertently opening some or other sort of Pandora's box, something leapt out at them that frightened them as well. And it's become an existential threat for them. And the chaos that's so visible now that we can all see that they can't hide at the moment is because they can't hide it at the moment because they've had to strip out all the drywall, go right back to the floorboards and the lath and plaster to try and rebuild something else that lets them regain control. But in the meantime, we can see the foundations of the building.
Yes. You're absolutely right. It all goes back to Brexit. It all goes back to Trump winning an election he wasn't supposed to win. It all goes back to and then in 2019, I noted this is where you're right to identify 2019, because 2019 was when the United States banking system and the Federal Reserve started the process of throwing the rock into the pond and saying we're doing something different. And this is going to sound a little geeky, and I know we're coming up on the end of this. I'm just going to remind everybody that back in 2019, American banks stopped accepting European sovereign debt at par for collateral. And that's what created, in the long run, the dearth of dollars overseas, which then led to the repo crisis, SOFR crisis of September 2019. That was the shot across the bow, because then 6 months later, Fed policy was going to run out. The Fed steps in, does their thing, and within 6 months, nothing's been fixed. Now you have another incipient crisis that's always going to come 6 months later, similar to what happened between the repo crisis of 2007 and Bear Stearns vaporizing in March 2008. Same kind, almost exactly the same scenario. So now you get into March of 2020, and they have to do something to keep the United States from being able to fix this. And what do? They unleash COVID on us. They have the price of oil over a weekend. They cause the entire market to go bidless, including the U.S. Treasury market, which is that was a financial tactical nuke. Okay, so the real war is financial. Okay, the real war is up there. The kinetic war, the thing that costs people lives that we can see, are downstream of that. But the real costs in terms of human life and in terms of human anxiety and stress and birth rates and depression and alcoholism and everything else come from the financial system. And all of our coping mechanisms and all of our every day I get up and I have to tell myself not to indulge my coping mechanisms of eating bad food in order to make myself feel good while I watch the world melt down, right? Every day I have to get up and say, no, not going to the store to get a candy bar, gonna have a steak, done, gonna lose 10 pounds, and I have to tell myself this every hour of every day. while I watch this play out. So I understand the psychic toll. If it's happening to me, it's happening to everyone. And that's the time I'm talking about when I talked about earlier. We have to get that back.
That's when we in this house we talk about this bifurcation. There's people in two different paths, and clearly, there are the people that are going to the store to buy, a candy bar, and I've chosen to get lighter, stronger. Everything for me is about sort of physical, emotional, moral strength, because I think the chaos is supposed to gull us into, just have that candy bar, just let it go. You think, no, this is precise this moment is when you've got to knuckle down and lift something heavy.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Before we started recording, you were hoping that I would come in smoking a big fat stogie. Well, I got news for you. Well, I happen to be in transition between two different, lives effectively. So I can't sit in my office and smoke cigars anymore. But I realized, like, sitting in my office doing 3 podcasts a day, smoking a cigar at every one of them in the closed room, I'm like, my health is degrading really rapidly. Even no matter how many air cleaners I put in the room, it's not good. And so I feel bad about it, because I love smoking a cigar while I do these podcasts, because it's a great focusing agent to, like, get my big ADHD brain to, like, settle down, take a puff, think, and then respond, right? And I'm not doing that recently, and it's hard. It is. But that third cigar a day, that needs to go away. I need to get back to 2, maybe 1, It's part of the process. It's part of the reason why we're, why we're making a move away from Florida in order to improve my wife's health, and both mental and physical, right? So yeah, it is what it is. It's like, but these are the little things you can do every day. If you just even identify those things in yourself, right? Then, admitting you have a problem is the first step to curing said problem. It doesn't matter what it is, right? So we just go from there.
That's the solution for the world. Just admitting we've got a problem.
Exactly. Like we're a bunch, we're all just a bunch of alcoholics, like, just trying to, like, get through the day. You know what I mean? And just admit it, and, like, clutch your Bill W, your Bill W coin, and go, yep, it's been a week, haven't had a candy bar in 4 days. All right, yes, you're okay. And then we just go on. So,
Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope this is the first of many conversations, but for your insights for the last, getting on for 3/4 of an hour now, which is more time with you than I expected to have. Thank you very much.
oh, you're more than welcome, Neil. It was great to meet you. Great to do this. And yes, absolutely. Why don't we make it a point that I invite you onto my show, and we'll just go, and then we can have whatever long form chat you and I want to have about anything you want. I would love. It would be my honor, sir, to host you. Okay.
Oh, Tom, lovely to hear that from you. We'll definitely do that. Tom Luongo, thank you very much.